Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. So I just saw some clips of pro-Israel bigot Douglas Murray getting exposed for the rambling, deceptive Zion propaganda pusher that he is on Joe Rogan's show, where Joe, along with Dave Smith, absolutely demolished Murray's usual tired arguments in favour of wiping out Palestinians and waging wars on Muslim countries. From his previous statements, it's fair to conclude that Douglas Murray is an outright Islamophobe and a racial supremacist, so to see him get wrecked and humiliated so badly on such a large platform was quite satisfactory. Let's look at the first clip.
The bigger picture dynamics to all of this is that we have, at least since 9/11, been in a state of perpetual war. All of these wars have been disasters. There have been so many lies involved in selling all of them. The whole Iraq war, the whole war in Afghanistan, just lying the whole way through. It's just like lie after lie after lie with disastrous wars. And so this does create a fertile ground for people to say, I wonder if they were lying about all these wars.
Sure,
again, I'm not really trying to argue about World War II. I'd rather argue about these wars today.
I think the interesting question is whether you're busy watering it.
Well, should you not talk about mistakes that were made overall?
Absolutely.
Okay, you should.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm all for going back and looking at mistakes.
So what is your argument then?
You say, I'm not a historian, but I'm going to spend my time talking about history. I'm not a journalist, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. It's a weird move, yeah?
No.
You don't think?
No, I'm a free American. I can talk about what I like to.
So what is the point
here?
I've noticed you can. But
so
we
what's
all
the
can.
point?
The point is, what are you pushing? What are you watering?
What
Why?
am I pushing?
Yes.
Liberty, free markets, peace, prosperity, not getting in another stupid catastrophic war, which we're on the precipice of right now.
You keep referring to we being in wars. There's a very big difference between a country having a military that's engaged and a country being at war. This country has not been at war for 25 years. You have not been fighting for the American homeland for 25 years.
Yes, we haven't. That's true. Right. We haven't had a war on our shores. We've been picking on third world countries halfway around the world.
Well, you haven't been randomly picking on them. I mean, Afghanistan, you went...
I didn't say it was random.
Yeah, right, okay. We went for Afghanistan to find bin Laden and take revenge for 9/11 and stop an attack like that happening again on the American homeland. That is very different from a country being at war.
Yeah, but that's a total mischaracterization of the war in Afghanistan. It's one thing to say that might be an accurate characterization of the Special Operations mission in late 2001, but then we fought a 20-year regime change war against the Taliban.
Because you got dragged into the quicksand of war.
Oh, yes. Okay, fine. But I thought it wasn't a war. Like, what? I don't get your argument.
No, I said it was a war. It's your use of we, as if you're personally like suffering this war. And you're a taxpayer.
When I say we,
we're taxpayers,
implied,
so we pay for it. Okay, fine.
So if I went back and corrected you on every time you've used the term we to refer to your government or something like that, like if I were to say, oh, we just imposed tariffs on China, would you point out that I didn't and it was the Trump administration?
You take it obviously very personally, and that's your right to do so, of course. I'm just trying to make sure we're accurate here.
What do you think I'm taking personally?
Just that, the American wars.
Sure, yeah. I think they've killed hundreds of thousands of people and cost my country $8 trillion and degraded my country very much.
And there's a very good argument to make on that. I'm still slightly bemused about this move from I'm an expert on this and I have views to I'm a comedian.
I've never claimed to be an expert on anything.
This is the problem, Joe. I mean, if somebody says...
you have to claim to be an expert on something to have an opinion on something?
No, you don't have to be. You don't have to be. But
so
this is like,
issue?
I'm not a historian, but I'm pumping out history.
But wait a minute,
I'm not an expert, but I'm talking all the time about this
But you're not
thing.
even talking about specifically on what he just said.
No, I'm saying, this is my point about this. You say, I'm not an expert.
So what's the solution? To not talk about it?
No, it's to have more experts around.
No, the expert class hasn't done a great job.
I know,
This is follow the science.
I respect how Dave called out Murray's lies about the American invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, where Murray's ramblings sounded like a dated news segment from the early 2000s, repeating back George Bush Jr. nonsense talking points. As Dave correctly put it, the US have been picking on developing Muslim nations for decades, and have not only made up lies to invade these countries whilst destroying them in the process, but have also put a strain on their own citizens financially. It was hilarious to see Dave Smith expose Murray's cheap deflection tactics and hypocrisy when he tried to save face by focusing on singular words Dave had said, such as we and war, which resulted in Murray contradicting himself and looking like an idiot. Even Joe Rogan looked bemused and disgusted at Douglas Murray for resorting to childish avoidance techniques, and had to tell him to address Dave Smith's points instead of dancing around the actual conversation. The fact is that slimeball Douglas Murray was losing the debate, so he attempted to undermine Dave Smith by calling him a comedian with an opinion and framed himself as a journalist and expert. I find that ironic, as the majority of people these days do not trust reporters whatsoever, and we certainly don't see people like Douglas Murray who push Israeli propaganda as experts on anything except lies defending the loss of civilian life. Again, it was so funny to see Murray squirm whilst being exposed for the fraud that he is. Let's watch the next clip.
So there's a lot of people, I think, who are, when they're critical of the Israeli government's response to this, get lumped in as pro-Hamas. I will certainly say that's certainly not my position. I think that your characterization, first of all, of that they gave the Palestinians a state in 2005 is just wrong. I just think that is not at all an accurate way to describe the disengagement. So you're saying from 2005 all the way till October 7th, there was a two-state solution. It had been achieved.
Well, it was another state, yeah.
Oh, okay, but that would be two states then.
No, it was another state. It was different from the PA.
Okay, right, but I'm saying a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's interesting about that is that this is not how any of the leaders really describe it. I mean, when Netanyahu himself is not claiming that they had already achieved a two-state solution, why are you talking about this? What happened in 2005 in the disengagement was that essentially Israel went from occupying the place to surrounding the place, and they've had it under a brutal blockade since 2007.
I don't agree the blockade was brutal by any means.
You don't think the blockade of Gaza was brutal?
I mean, they allowed stuff in.
Some stuff has gotten in. Yes, that's true. I'll say this, right? Because there's been different levels of blockade, even before 2007, going back. I know in 1996, they had like a pretty strong blockade that year. According to the World Bank, it contracted 40% of the GDP of Gaza. So just for reference, the Great Depression was a 30% contraction. This was in 1996. For 1 year, they gave them something worse than our Great Depression. That was just 1 year. From 2007 on, there's been a blockade of that country. You don't think that's kept the country poor?
Why do you think there's a blockade of any kind?
So I think they disengaged in order to kill the peace process. I think they put the full blockade around the country for the reason that they've always kind of done it there, that, yeah, they don't want too much stuff getting in. They want to keep them, as they put it, on a diet, and they don't want rockets to fly into Israel.
If that desire to live in peace beside your neighbors had superseded the desire to stockpile rockets, it would all be different.
Yeah, or if Israel just hadn't occupied them for 60 years, it would all be different too.
Why is it the onus
always on them? The World Bank said in 1996 for the 1 year of the blockade.
Are quoting the World Bank. I love it.
It doesn't mean anything. This is a non-argument. Yes, I'm saying the World Bank did their own analysis of this, and they said that it was a 40%
your own analysis.
Hold on, you got to stop interrupting and let him finish the sentence.
The World Bank said that 40% drop in the GDP of 1 year due to the blockade, and there's been a blockade from 2007 on. So are you saying that this hasn't had an economic effect? Is that the argument?
No, of course it'll have an economic effect.
So you're saying you have to be on the ground and do an audit of the blockade in order to be able to comment on it?
I think you should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region. Yes, absolutely.
And the only way to do that is to be there in person.
I think that's the best way.
Well, either take on the arguments or don't, but I don't think
but your argument's incorrect.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, then present a counter-argument to it. But to just tell me I'm not allowed to talk about something
I'm
because I'm not an expert.
You're not allowed to talk
fine.
About
well, you're
it.
not an expert, so you shouldn't talk about it. You haven't been there. Yeah, I know. But you keep playing this game where it's like the whole opening to this podcast was like the non-experts talking about this is such a problem. Now you're saying because I haven't been there, I can't talk about it. Is there a blockade there that's causing economic devastation or not? According to the World Bank, there is.
I do believe that one of the things you should do if you're talking about something is to see it.
Yeah, you've established that. Is there a blockade?
The reason why trucks get searched is not because the Israelis want to search through grain or flour. It's because they wanted to stop the trucks containing the arms and the munitions.
Dave Smith effortlessly debunked Murray's lies regarding Israel ever giving Palestine anything. If you look through history, all Israel has ever done is take through theft and violence. Douglas Murray is so bought and paid for, he is unable to admit simple truths, even when they stare him in the face. Despite Dave giving him facts about how the occupation of Gaza has never ended, or that Israel starved them numerous times up until this very day, and even crashed their economy deliberately, all Murray could do in response was go into denial mode. This is further evident through how long it took Murray to grudgingly admit the existence of a Palestinian state. What's insane to me is that Murray denies the brutality of Israel starving Palestinians because a few scraps of aid were let in, and framed all Palestinians as usual as a military threat to Israel, making even innocent helpless children complicit. Dave Smith again was spot on when he said there would be no resistance from the Palestinians if Israel hadn't occupied them for decades, and Murray predictably in turn disgracefully denied the decades-old Israeli occupation of Palestine. Douglas Murray got absolutely wrecked here and desperately resorted to his usual interrupting and trying to discredit his opponent. Even Joe Rogan had to step in and put him in check by calling out Murray's interruptions and him constantly repeating why he's more qualified because he's been to Israel in person to collect his shekels. As you saw, Dave once again called out Murray's continuous deflection tactics by demanding he present a counter-argument rather than simply trying to discredit people because he doesn't have a rebuttal. I guess when Murray isn't on a right-wing news channel or doesn't have his fellow propagandists backing his lies, it results in total humiliation for him. Let's watch the last clip where Dave Smith schools Murray on Gaza.
I do find it kind of hard to lecture a group of people who are going through so much. Like the level of human suffering that's being inflicted on the people of Gaza right now cannot be overstated. And so, to lecture them about how you're supposed to handle that exactly. But I will say, man, I think there's kind of this selective empathy that you have here. Talk about October 7th. But at the same time, we're not having this conversation on October 9th or in November or December of 2023. We're having it in 2025 where the tragedy that's been inflicted on Gaza is orders of magnitudes greater than October 7th. There are just every day people are inundated with images of just dead women and children. This is like one of the most brutal wars. And by several metrics that really, like personally matter to me, like the number of dead kids, I think that's a pretty good one. It's more children have died than in any recent war. I mean, this is like, I do think there's almost like a fundamental framing bias. It seems to me that there's almost an implicit difference in the value that you place on Israeli life versus the value that we place on Palestinians' life. And to even we've gone this far into the conversation and haven't even talked about the fact that dude, Israel has, feel however you feel. If you want to argue, I haven't been there, stuff does get through the blockade. Okay, fine. This is a captive people, that Israel has dominated since at least 1967. Many of them are there because of the creation of the state of Israel, who used to live in what is now called Israel. And they are just, the amount of human suffering that's being inflicted on them when Hamas in many ways was forced on these people. In fact, we saw protests against Hamas just recently. So I don't know. That to me seems to be the greatest human tragedy. And I think much more so than you can characterize it as people being pro-Hamas or people being anti-Semitic. But I actually think that the mass movement around the world of people who oppose this war has been that people feel really awful about all these babies.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Smith was right on the money when he said the pompous lecturing of Palestinians by people like Murray while they're going through tremendous suffering is just low. He was right to call it the selective empathy the Zionist apologists display when they speak of October 7th as the one event that justifies the constant oppression of Palestinians who have experienced daily October 7th for the last 19 plus months. Dave nailed it when he said what the Gazans have been through since then is astronomically worse than October 7th, and that Douglas Murray and his counterparts not recognising this makes it blatantly obvious that they value Israeli lives more than Palestinian lives. The fact that Murray didn't even flinch at the mention of the images of deceased children or the stats citing Israel being responsible for more kids being killed than in any recent conflict says it all about him. It was so satisfactory to see every Douglas Murray lie defending Israel be debunked during this podcast. Smith not only spoke about how the Gazans have been held captive by Israel before Hamas ever existed, but also that they recently protested against Hamas, which totally obliterates Murray's previous false claim that all Palestinians are Hamas. I second Dave's statement that people are not opposing Israel because they are pro-Hamas or anti-Semitic. It's simply because of the amount of indefensible human suffering they are inflicting on innocent people, and worst of all, on children. Thank you for watching. Make sure to join my free Telegram group via the link in the description, where we as Muslims can speak freely and without censorship about issues like this. And remember to like, subscribe and become a channel member for access to exclusive content. Until next time, inshallah, Jazakallah khair.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah